Hello, fellow travelers. You're listening to the Respawn Station podcast. My name's Nick, and I'm joined by Sri.
Yes, hello. Look at that, Nick. This is what it's been leading up to. For you to do the intro. But I'm very excited to be here because Nick, I found since the last episode, there's this, and this could be totally not right, but I'm going to quote it anyway. There's this website, webicaster.com, and they essentially have this you need to publish 21 episodes to be in the top 1% of the world's podcasts because a lot of people don't stick through it. But the thing I really wanted to highlight is that the first relevant fact is that there are around 2 million podcasts out there. Now, I don't know when this was published, so this could probably be higher, but the second interesting fact is that 90% of the podcasts do not survive beyond their third episode. And ladies and gentlemen, we are in the fourth episode. So
We lived.
it's only up from here. But now I have the goal now to hit episode 21 and actually episode 22. Once we hit episode 22, it'll be a huge celebration for us. But with that said, Nick, I'm actually just going to go right at you because obviously we start off this episode, every episode, by asking what we're playing. But this episode, I saw Nick playing 40K bolt gun before we went live, so I have to know.
Literally about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, what brought you back?
Unfinished business, I suppose.
Wow.
I was playing some other games that we'll probably get into, but they were a bit shorter. And because like last week I had mentioned that I was starting Fallout 2, and I haven't gotten super into that yet. So I was like, all right, I was like halfway through Bolt Gun, so I gotta pick that back up and finish that before I get into another big game.
Oh, so you hadn't finished it. You were going back for the. I see. I see. I thought you were cleaning up like trophies or achievements or something like that.
No, I was only like halfway through, and then I had stopped to play some other stuff. But yeah, I'm almost done with the second chapter now, so I'll be moving into like the third act.
See, here's the thing with me. I've said this before. Obviously, I fell behind a little bit in terms of gaming in February and a little bit of February and March. And so for me, I've been hopping around a bunch of games. Like I just this weekend, I had a little bit of time, and I figured Austin and I had nothing better to do, so we started playing uh, Splinter Cell Conviction co-op, and it's I think the co-op story is actually like a different story, like a different campaign than the main one. I could be wrong because we played for maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours, I think, and we're halfway done this thing. There's only four missions, but it's a fun time. It's a 360 title, so it's a fun kind of going back to it and goofing around a little bit. But I am happy to say that since the last episode, I've done two things. One, I've cleared our inbox. All 360 something emails are gone. I've read them. I've responded to the ones. Thank you, thank you. And then the other thing is that I've completed my first game. My first game since Wolfenstein Old Blood. So we're going to talk a little bit about Slay the Princess. Now, I actually have my reviews up on respawnstation.com right now, and you can go ahead and check it out. And I actually recommend you check it out because it's such a weird game to talk about, and I think it's a little bit easier to digest what I have to say when it's edited by Nick and not as like disjointed. But I will say this: for those of you who don't know, Slay the Princess is a surrealistic horror visual novel. And if you know me, I've loved visual novels for a long time, and I used to play them all the time in like high school, early college. And then I kind of stopped, but then last year I went back into it, played a few that I quite enjoyed, like Gods of the Twilight. And so obviously when the email came through for this, I was very curious. And man, it is such an interesting game. It's so weird to say. And again, I say this in my review, but a lot of people look at visual novels and immediately they write it off like, oh, it's a visual novel. It's like a book. I'm not going to read a book. Or if I want to read a book, I'll read a book, etc. But the thing I find so interesting is one, it's fully voiced, which is just really impressive. But also, being a visual novel, tells a story in a way that only like a video game can tell, which I thought was really interesting because like those themes you can certainly do in a book or a movie or something like that, but it's just in a game the way that it's kind of designed. I thought it was just really really awesome, and I've an interview queued up to listen to about the game and stuff that I'm kind of excited to go through. It's about like 4 hours long, but it's one of those games you can kind of keep going. You can go back, experience some of the weird things, and go back and forth on it. So, yeah, definitely check it out. Again, it's called Slay the Princess. It's available now on PC, and they just did a big kind of content update. So there's some exciting things that they kind of spruced up a little bit. But with that said, that review is already up. Now, if you're watching this live, first of all, thank you. We appreciate it. And also, quick shout out to anyone who gave the show a rating on Spotify or iTunes. It means a lot to us. It helps out a lot. So if you have a Spotify account and you haven't yet done so, take a second to give the show a rating. It would be great. But with that said, going up tomorrow, early in the morning, is another review. This one from Nick for a game called Pepper Grinder. Nick, what do you got to say about this thing? I mean, before people can read it for themselves.
Sure thing. It's Pepper Grinder is a new 2D action platformer developed by, I'm not sure exactly how to say it. It's
Yeah,
like
I read
R-Etch or
I
something.
read it in his review as I was doing it, and I was like, Nick couldn't have spelled this wrong, and I had to look it up, and I was like, no, that's right.
It's like AHR space ECH.
Yeah,
So apologies
I
on
think it's
the
R.
pronunciation there. But it's published by Devolver Digital, which
Yeah.
I love me some Devolver games. A lot of what they do like speaks to me, and they just seem to
Yeah.
pick really good projects to back.
Yeah.
They might be my favorite publisher. Like if I were
I think the
asked
thing with
that with a gun to my
Devolver
head.
is that they pick the games that it feels right to support. Like you know what I mean? Like it just like
Hmm.
they're almost like, and I feel like this comparison has probably been made to death, but they're kind of like A24 in that like they're so specifically crafted that you can almost tell that it's, oh yeah, this has got to be a Devolver. There's some games that aren't Devolver that you're like, this feels like a Devolver game because they just have that kind of vibe. But yeah, the
Hmm.
incredible selection from that team.
Yeah, and this is just like I had seen the trailer in I think it was a Nintendo Direct a long time ago, like a one of
I
their
hadn't even
indie
heard of it. Yeah,
ones. And as soon as I saw it at first, I'm like, oh man, that looks fun. I'm probably gonna play that. And lo and behold, it came out, and I bought it, and I played it, and there's a review coming up tomorrow.
yeah,
Um, it's it's really fun. So it's a platformer, so it's stage based. You're going through different levels on like a world. There's a boss at the end. You fight the boss, and then you go on to the next world. In the
right,
stages, you're collecting coins and treasure, that sort of thing. Typical kind of stuff for a platformer. But the interesting thing about Pepper Grinder is you have this drill tool
yeah.
that you use,
Oh, by the
and
way,
it's
sorry,
yeah, go,
you might have been a little loud, so I apologize to anyone listening. I tweaked it a little bit, so it should be better now. But there you go. Go ahead.
sure thing. Thanks for doing that, by the way. Working on the fly. Uh, so with this drill, there's like these patches of like earth and stuff that you can drill into, and it'll like propel you through the dirt, and then
Mm,
you can pop out of the dirt, and it'll launch you up into the air. But that's not the only thing that the drill is used for. Throughout the stages, you're doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Like it gets a grapple hook at one point, so you're launching out of the dirt and grappling onto different points. You can use it to like use this makeshift minigun thing to shoot at enemies. You can drive vehicles with it. So they come up with a lot of really interesting things to do with it. And it's a retro styled platformer.
right,
So basically the visuals remind me of kind of like a Game Boy Advance game. So it's not quite as like, retro as like original like Nintendo stuff, but it's
right.
kind of that like mid pixel art before jumping into 3D kind of look.
Uh-huh.
And I think it looks really nice. Satisfaction is kind of the key with this game. The sound effects, the visuals, the gameplay, like all of it's like super satisfying. I have a couple of nitpicks that I get into in the review, but honestly, like It's a really solid 2D platformer. Like I wouldn't have been shocked if this was, a Nintendo backed indie game. Like it's really high quality. So it's a
And
lot of fun. It's short, so maybe go into the knowing that. It
right.
took me about 5 hours taking my time. So it's like it's not like super long, but there is some replayability there. And overall, it did the one thing that I want to praise it for is that it didn't overstay its welcome. It left at a good point, leaving me wanting more. And there's definitely some room that there could be an expansion or a sequel down the line, maybe.
Hmm. So you gave the game an 8, and maybe I ruined the surprise for people who or like, oh man, I
We're
can't wait.
waiting for that
Yeah,
review.
we're waiting for that reveal. And just to kind of tie up the loose end, I also gave Slay the Princess an 8 out of 10 as well. But with that said, there's one game, the next game up that we have to talk about, that what we're playing, that I actually don't recognize. It's called Sayonara Wild Hearts. Nick, what's this one?
Yeah, so this is a game that came out a couple years ago, I believe, and it is
Oh, I see.
a Annapurna interactive game, which I played a couple of Annapurna games in the past, but they're unlike Devolver, they're not really one of my go-tos. Like a lot of they also have a very strong specific style,
Right.
um, and that's like less my cup of tea. But this one I had watched a streamer play it a little bit, and I thought it looked interesting, so I waited for a sale to pick it up, and I got it recently. And basically, what Sayonara Wild Hearts is it's think of like a rhythm based temple run with like
Nice.
really interesting visuals and camera angles, and it's like set to like an album essentially. So it's not like a long game. I literally played through it twice back to back, and it took about 2 hours. So it's
Oh,
about an
damn.
hour to
Nice.
play through it, start to finish. And yeah, it's like super fast. It's super crazy with the camera angles. The music is like really good, and it had like a kind of a surprisingly emotional ending, which I was not expecting at all for like a hour long,
For a game
music temple
where
run.
you're wielding swords and breaking hearts at 200 miles per hour, you weren't
Exactly.
expecting
So
emotional from
yeah,
that.
it's definitely a very interesting game. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to,
Sure.
especially for just like hopping in and being like, okay, what's this game all about?
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a lot of fun in those 2 hours. That's definitely on the shorter side of a game, though. Like, I don't know how many games I've played that,
You could beat
can
back to
really just
back.
be like in an hour, more or less. But it's definitely fun. And if you find it on a sale somewhere, um, I definitely recommend it. I mean, I would even probably recommend it full price. It's like $12, I think, full price. So it's not like a, crazy expensive game or anything, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, speaking of games that are not crazy expensive, Nick, let's get into some of the news, because right off the bat, we have Dave the Diver coming to PlayStation on April 16th. So, 2 weeks roughly, give or take. Nick, have you played Dave the Diver?
I have not. The water themed indie game starting with D that I played was Dredge. So
Oh, I
they
see.
passed my radar, unfortunately.
So we were sent a code for a Dave the Diver, and it's one of those games that I find, if you listen to episode 2 with Patrick. Oh, by the way, pause. Congratulations to Patrick for hitting their goal for on Kickstarter for Cinnabunny. And they're
Woo!
well on their way to their first stretch goal as well. So yeah, congratulations to them, and hopefully we'll get Patrick back on, and we'll talk about more about Cinnabunny. Somewhere, hopefully after we make it to episode 22, the possibilities are endless. But nevertheless, so specifically Dave the Diver, I'm a big fan of Stardew Valley, like I said in episode 2, but so I was kind of didn't know what to expect going in, because I heard everyone saying this is a chill game. a water-based game, and if you know me, I love sharks, and so I don't think I was as enamored with the game as I think a lot of people were. I mean, the internet really took to this game. I still think it's a really great game. It's just like, it's not going up as my favorites of the year. But back then, let's see, I reviewed it back in July 2023. I'm not sure what the date was, but I said, Dave the Diver is a fantastic game that's easy to sink time into. It has a simple and addictive gameplay loop with plenty of side content to keep you entertained. If you're looking for a new lighthearted RPG to get addicted to, put this game on the top of your list. My only drawback with the game is a personal one due to a lifelong love of sharks, but past some missions, it's something I can ignore. So there you go, Dave the Diver. I think it's already on Nintendo Switch. It's on PC, and it's coming to PlayStation soon. And then, speaking of other aquatic games that start with the letter D, Dredge is... I'll throw this up in here as we move. But so Dredge has obviously done pretty well, and we got an email earlier this week that I thought I would share with everyone. So Black Salt Games, who are the developers of Dredge, donates 100,000 NZD. I'm guessing that's like New Zealand dollars. I think that's what that is. Can you double check that for me, Nick?
Yeah, sure thing.
And is for marine conservation efforts, which I thought was really cool. Nick, you actually played Dredge and the first DLC pack, right? The Pale Reach or something like that.
Yes, I did, and it is New Zealand dollars.
Perfect. And you remember? I remember you saying you really liked it. So I mean, I'm glad that the game is doing really well enough for them to kind of put their money where their mouth was, I guess. So yeah.
It was definitely a great game. So I wouldn't be opposed to hopping back in for some more down the line.
I remember that we got a code for that game right before the Game Awards happened, and I think at the time you hadn't really made up your mind on like an indie game of the year or something like that. Dredge seemed to have shot up on your list right after you played it. I mean, it was.
Mm-hmm. There might be some recency bias in there with how close that was, but
sure,
it was definitely good. So.
Right. No, it was. You know what? If you didn't review it, Nick, I might have given it a shot. But, nevertheless, moving on. Next up on the list. This is one that I'm actually personally excited for, and that is X Defiant. As Nick knows, and you guys will over the course of the show probably know, I'm a big fan of Ubisoft, and X Defiant is their kind of answer to Call of Duty in a way. If you look at kind of Hyperscape as their answer to like Fortnite or something, then this is their answer to Call of Duty and Battlefield. It's a first-person shooter, round-based kind of thing. Very simple.
Trey, if I could cut in real quick, I don't know if I should be excited or concerned that you were comparing X Defiant to Hyperscape.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair. So I am one of the few people that did play X Defiant, sorry, not X Defiant. I did play X Defiant as well, but I played Hyperscape for like the short amount of time that it was up, and man, I had a good time with it despite all the problems. It was just nice to see kind of another big. I mean, at the time, it was nice to see another big company that wasn't just the same, like Epic Games putting out a battle royale. And like I said, I like Fortnite, or God damn it, Ubisoft. But yeah, that went by the wayside pretty fast. But this one it hasn't even had a chance to go to the wayside because it's not even out yet. But X Defiant did an open playtest a few months ago, and I did play that back then, and I had a really good time with it. It was just kind of snappy, for like simple, fun first-person shooter where you kind of play through as various Ubisoft IPs. So like I believe there's like Tom Clancy's Division has one, a Far Cry series has like a class, and I think maybe Splinter Cell is something like that. They have those kind of classes that are from Ubisoft. and it was supposed to have come out a while ago, but it unfortunately hasn't done so. I think it was rejected by the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store for like not being complete or something like that. But with that said, we finally have an update on it, and so to kind of quote it briefly. First and foremost, thank you for the continued support for X Defiant. We are proud to have such a passionate community, of course. The game has always been community first, with player feedback top priority, and while we hoped to go live by the end of March, there are still some improvements that we need to test before that. So we're finishing preparation for a 12-hour server test session that will be worldwide on PS5, Xbox Series XS, on PC. There is no exact dates on this yet that I've seen, but hopefully we'll get kind of dates on that soon. I'm not quoting them anymore now. Now it's just me. But yeah, I'm definitely going to go back in and give it a go because I really like it, and I really hope that it's. I mean, back in November or October, I wrote an article, one of our few opinion pieces that we really have that aren't, our reviews per se, on Call of Duty, and I listed X Defiant as one of the games I was looking forward to. And I remember getting like people being mad, like, why would you recommend X Defiant? It's not out yet. So hopefully I can finally, I can make that point and not have people say that to me. But
you said you played it before, right?
Yes. Yep.
Is it like I know very little about it outside of it's a Ubisoft shooter. Is it like a class shooter, or is it like a Call of Duty where it's like
it's like it's more like Call of Duty. It's
same?
it's not like Overwatch, but there's like classes, but it's like I'd kind of compare it to have you played Black Ops 4 or like Black Ops 3?
I played a little bit of 3
because like they have that thing where like you're essentially like it's like you have a special kind of limited ability, like after a while, but it's not like that's the kind of the thing that you go for. So it's not like, it's not Overwatch. It's not like Marvel Rivals, which is a upcoming squad team-based shooter. I don't even know what company's making it, actually. I just remember
it's NetEase.
NetEase. Okay, yeah. So it's not like that. And yeah, maybe we'll hop on, Nick, when the next playtest happens, because I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I know you also play. You're also like me. We occasionally dip into a Call of Duty. We're not against it. So, yeah, we'll check it out. So the next game, this one's I'm actually really intrigued by, because it's it's a game in development from Yellow Brick Games, and it's led by Mike Laidlaw, Laidlew. And for those who don't know him, he's the longtime creative director on the Dragon Age series. And it's a new game. It's a new third-person action-adventure game called Eternal Strands. Nick, have you seen this?
I think I saw some screenshots from it, but I haven't seen like a trailer or anything, if that's out there.
Yes, yeah. There's an official reveal trailer that just came out yesterday, and it's this. I mean, it definitely it's a fantasy game. It has this really bright color palette, which has me intrigued. But it also has these the Shadow of the Colossus, like or I guess Dragon's Dogma kind of feature or mechanic where you can actually climb the bosses and stuff too.
Oh, cool.
So
I always love that.
Yeah, you haven't gotten around to seeing it yet?
No, I haven't seen this yet. Well, I real quick, I just looked up on my phone because I kept seeing not only you but other people saying, Mike Laidlaw, the guy from Dragon Age, and I was like, didn't that guy work on like Half-Life? Like, why are people bringing up Dragon Age? And I just googled it. It's Mark Laidlaw that worked on Half-Life, not Mike. So I was like, wow. I was just like, man, am I just getting?
That's close, dude. I
mean, what is it, Bernstein Bears or whatever there? But
yeah, no, I mean, not a lot of people would have made that, could have made that connection. But so just kind of briefly talking about it while we're here. So the game's coming out for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, obviously via Steam. Behind it has the award-winning composer Austin Wintory, who most people he composed music for Journey and then also Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And let's see, they have a quick. I'm on their website now, just kind of seeing. Yeah, I mean, there's not too much more about it at the moment. What's their description? Fight epic towering creatures while blending magical abilities with an arsenal of powerful weapons to keep the world from crumbling in this third-person action adventure game. There you go. I feel like that was very. They had a lot of buzzwords in that one. They're very
Yeah.
straightforward, safe summary, but hopefully we'll get more
Right.
details.
I kind of feel like it's probably about time that a lot of developers are thinking like, hey, you know what was fun? Shadow of the Colossus. You know what isn't really made anymore? Shadow of the
Shadow of the
Colossus.
Colossus.
So I think, seeing it in Dragon's Dogma 2 and then seeing it in something like this, like that kind of makes sense. I wouldn't even be
Sure.
surprised if there's like a couple other games that are trying to do a similar thing going forward that we'll start seeing soon because
Yeah.
it definitely was for its time a very unique game and not a whole lot of games really capture that sense of scale, especially in like a
Yeah.
fantasy RPG. You have things like Final Fantasy 16 and like other Final Fantasy games that like deal with massive scale and all this, but
Dude,
like not really to the level of like, climbing up onto a creature
creature,
and like
right.
interacting with it in that way. So
I think
sounds
that
interesting.
one of the things that I've always been very vocal about is scale. I think that there was a kind of a golden age, probably around like the launch of the PS3 360 and like a few years into that kind of generation, where people, I think, I don't know, maybe this is like me kind of projecting onto the general belief at the time, but I think developers were like, whoa, these systems are so much more powerful. Let's go ape shit. And so there was just these games that had incredible scale of like towering creatures. And I feel like, again, it could be like a rose tinted glasses type of thing. And I remember playing them as a kid and being kind of blown away. So like I want those kind of games to be back, but I really want those games to be back. And there's a few games I think that Final Fantasy 16, right? Yeah, it's 16.
Mhm.
I thought that was like the scale of that game was really fucking cool. So yeah, give me more games that have really cool scale, kind of birds for scale. If you have birds for scale in a game, I'm in. Or humans
God
for
of War
scale.
3
If
was
it's that
also
big.
one that made me think of like scale in that way. Did you ever
Yes,
play
I
God of War
I
3?
haven't played it like I've played it at a friend's house, but like I know what you're talking about because it is like yeah, like the
Yeah,
scale of
they
that
have
game
those
is cool.
giant titans that you're like scaling and
Scaling, yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Like that stuff is always cool.
So hopefully, this generation, hopefully we'll get some more. And I have to remember not to touch my mic stand too much because one, it'll fall apart, or two, it'll kind of like squeak. So I have to like play with it nicely.
Mhm.
Um, here's one that I'm so. Actually, I'm gonna sneak one in there because this was originally not in the docket. But I still want to bring it up because I think it's an interesting conversation. Some of you might have seen this quote that's going around that essentially says that CD Projekt Red doesn't believe that microtransactions have a place in single player games. And obviously, this is a very like this quote. I think it just came out yesterday or today. It's very very recent. And obviously, people are very vocally supporting this because it's kind of like a belief that a lot of the consumers have had about video games, but video game microtransactions are so lucrative that it's hard to argue against it. But seeing someone like CDPR, kind of, as kind of big as CDPR say that, obviously it gives a little bit more weight to it, similar to how I believe it was the CEO of Larian. Kind of recently did an award speech that was about kind of just don't not firing people, etc., in the gaming industry and kind of training long-term talent.
Mhm.
But with that said, all that is to say, we have CDPR, who I think is essentially, whether you like their games or not, at the top of the game. Like they're afforded a budget, they're afforded freedom as an independent game developer who also publishes games, I guess. Um, they're kind of outside of the normal ring, right? You're looking at normal AAA games. There's mandates. There's executives that are like, forcing microtransactions into games, or those kind of methods that maybe a developer didn't want to. Which brings me to a topic that I think Nick initially didn't want to do, but Nick, we're going in, dipping in a little bit anyway, because Dragon's Dogma 2 has microtransactions that unlock fast travel points. Now, what I find really interesting about this is recent information that I found that kind of really has been making me think about it more and more. Is that initially that I think the game director had made it a point to say how fast travel isn't necessary in games because people should kind of get that sense of exploration, and it's something that I've heard people who've played Dragon's Dogma 2 kind of echo, in that it feels like a Lord of the Rings or like Fellowship of the Rings type of thing, where you're going on a journey and you're actually walking that entire way, and all that the stuff that happens in between on the way is just as kind of adventurous and random as the actual kind of destination. So, like, Nick, what are your thoughts on a publisher essentially adding in microtransactions that go against the design of a game? Initially, that was like, or like kind of change it based on like how it was meant to be played, or at least seemingly meant to be played. You know what I mean?
Sure. So there's a couple different angles that I could go about it, trying to answer that question. Um, First of all, I should say, or at least I should mention, that I initially didn't really want to talk about it just because, like, it's, very hot button right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
There's a lot of opinions going around and misinformation and all of that. As far as from what I have heard in specific regards to Dragon's Dogma 2, there is fast travel in the game. You use an item to do it, and this microtransaction is like an additional item. So you have like, I believe it's like two or three of these fast travel crystals. Let's just say I don't know what they actually are, but let's say it's a two or three of these fast travel crystals, and you place it in the world where you want to be able to use it. And I believe the microtransaction is like an additional, again, one or two of these crystals that you can have. So it's not like it's like locked behind
Sure.
paying. You have the ability to do this in game. It's just getting extra ones of these.
Yeah.
Um, the thing that I should also bring up is that as far as it goes with microtransactions in single player games, specifically from Capcom, they also haven't been like, you know, microtransactions that make the most sense, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, specifically, I draw a parallel to Itsuno's last game, which Hideaki Itsuno is the director for Dragon's Dogma 2. His last game was Devil May Cry 5, and that game had microtransactions, which were like extra currency in the game to be able to unlock like upgrades and stuff. But you got so much currency in the game, there was no real point to ever spend money on it because it's like it didn't even feel like you were
Right.
losing out significantly by
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not paying or anything. Like you get like thousands of these currencies like every level.
Right.
So that was another like single player game that had microtransactions that I was just kind of thinking like who buys this? Because it's like you don't need this at all, and they,
Yeah.
they don't really make a considered effort for it. Then you look at some of the other stuff under Capcom stuff like Resident Evil 4 for mercenaries. They had
Oh yeah.
microtransactions that
Definitely.
could let you just get items quicker than by playing it. So it's like it for a lot of their games, they to me as a consumer, as somebody who like I'm not going to say I've never bought a microtransaction. I've bought them for certain games, but I don't do it often.
Right.
You know, I for the most part, most developers or publishers, however you want to look at it, I don't think implement it very great or very consumer friendly, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
So like those I don't try to really interact with. But uh with these ones, I mean, at a certain point, like my opinion kind of becomes if the game is really good and I'm having a lot of fun with it and they seem harmless enough, like I would almost view these microtransactions as like a tip jar. If you
Sure.
just want to throw like a little extra at a developer or something like that.
Yeah.
Again, that's for ones that are like this, where there really is no point to buy them.
Right.
You're not being like locked out of content or anything like that. Certain games I feel can't get treated that way because, they do cordon off like content or like make the grind so crazy that, it really incentivizes like if you don't want to spend 30 hours doing this, then
Right.
give us money. Like those ones obviously I could do without. But yeah, it's a real tricky situation because you have, you know, a lot of nuance with microtransactions like this. And then there's, people on the internet in comment sections that are like, the absolute extremes of both ends, where it's like you should never criticize a developer for having
Yep.
microtransactions, or if your game has microtransactions, it doesn't deserve to release or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
No, yeah, I actually I'm pretty close to you in that I don't I've also like purchased very few microtransactions in a video game, and I'm similar. I don't. Well, I actually never viewed it as a tip jar, but that's a good way of kind of looking at it. In terms of like just kind of a little extra way to support the developer, I suppose. For me, it's always if you can ignore them, I'm fine with it. Like, as someone who kind of does a lot of single player games, obviously, for streams and stuff, I do multiplayer, but oh my god, this trailer just started to play in the background, and I was like, what the hell is happening? Um, but I'm in a similar place. I don't mind microtransactions. Now, I do want to back up some of the stuff I'm saying just to kind of give people context. I don't want to just have this be a gossip show. So back in, there's that squeak again from that mic stand. So back in January 24th of this year, the director of Dragon's Dogma 2, whose name is Hideki Itsuno, said, when asked about fast travel, or just when talking about travel in video games, and it says, just quote, just give it a try. Travel is boring? Question mark. That's not true. It's only an issue because your game is boring. All you have to do is make travel fun. Unquote. Now, in Dragon's Dogma 2, from what I understand, there's I think Nick was kind of saying there's the fast travel works with I think it's ox carts that you can kind of use as like set points where you can fast travel to, you go to a place, you get a ride from an ox cart, etc. So it's kind of like in universe. And then there's these port crystals, I think is what they're called, that then you can buy to essentially have fast travel for additional. So it's not like, yeah, as you said, it's not as kind of cut and dry as I think I probably, as to my fault, had initially said it, but still, I think that for stuff like this, I need to stop touching my mic, dude. I'm just gonna move it right here. I'm not gonna move it. All right. So the last 2 points I have to say about this, just to wrap up this part of the conversation. One, I think that microtransactions are fine, and even in a single player game, even if they're ignorable, if they're not like just kind of just bullshit for the sake of putting stuff on the store, that kind of limit the player's experience. But that being said, I don't think like a new color on the gun is limiting the player's experience. Like that stuff I don't care about. That being said, I do think it's a little weird where, again, with this, in terms of this specifically, of like how the game is designed to be a certain way and having probably a mandate that sort of pushes it in a different way. That seems a little weird to me. Now, that being said, this game is currently, obviously, it reviewed really well, but it's at a 58% of the 51,000 user reviews of this game are positive. So it's in a mixed right now on Steam. But I think that also has to do with the plethora of other things, including like performance on PC, which unfortunately, for a lot, at least every 6 months, there's at least one big AAA game that just seems to miss the mark on the PC port.
Right.
But speaking of, let's get to the last topic on our newscast section, which actually kind of leads us into the main topic. So PC Gamer has recently published an article that says, quote, the gold rush is over. Slay the Spire and Darkest Dungeon devs say that the big Game Pass and Epic exclusive deals have dried up for indie devs. Now, what this means, you can go ahead to pcgamer.com to check out this full piece, but essentially an interview at GDC in San Francisco, the developers of Darkest Dungeon, they essentially talked about how, there's, to sum it up, Xbox at a point was, for the last probably 3 years, they've been putting a bunch of money into pumping up Xbox Game Pass, just throwing money at games to keep them on the platform, to drive up the kind of value of the product, and then, obviously get more subscribers. That's kind of the really big thing that Xbox has been doing this generation. On the other side of that, you have Epic, who do sort of a similar thing where they just throw a lot of money, probably that they make from Fortnite microtransactions, and they are getting these weekly exclusive games that you can get for free on Epic Game Store. Which, I would love to see the statistic of how many average games people on Epic Games have and how many of them they've actually played, because I feel like the number has to be like ridiculously low, like super high games with like one game played or something. Mm-hmm. And this was a really good way for some, developers, like, you could put up your game and there's a high chance that like someone like, Xbox or Microsoft, or Epic will come by and be like, hey, you want this money to be on our platform. And I think last year, actually, during the whole kind of all those leaked documents and stuff for the Xbox where they uploaded to the wrong server, et cetera, they actually had some a document that was like estimates of it was an internal estimates of how much they thought like games would sell for. I think, and this is off the top of my head, but you get the ballpark. I think they said like they valued like Assassin's Creed Valhalla at like $15 million or something, and crazy enough, and they valued Baldur's Gate 3 around like 300,000. So that goes to show how long ago that was, where they I don't think anyone really saw the gigantic success that Baldur's Gate 3 would be.
Yeah, I think that document you're referring to was less about like how much they thought it was going to sell, and it was more of like an internal audit on how much they thought that they needed to offer.
Right.
To get it
yeah,
on
that's
Game
what.
Pass.
Yes. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Not. Yeah. But that being said, recently that stuff has kind of that stuff has kind of changed. So, I guess, maybe I'll read a quote from this. So Casey Yano, the co-founder of Slay the Spire studio Megacrit, said, I talked to at least 5 small teams, like 35 members and under during GDC, and they're like, cuts, funding's canceled, talks that were going on for the year canceled. And it sounds like it's shit. Whether we're definitely being very privileged to be able to self-fund, because that's the position that the studio's in. Otherwise, it'd be I'd be very, very, very scared right now. And I think this kind of echoes just the general statement of how the industry is currently. I mean, we've kind of had a little bit with Patrick, and I think he's kind of in a similar boat where if you're self-funding, if you're kind of the person kind of making those decisions, and you're able to both fund and produce the games, I think you're on definitely a little bit of a different boat than obviously someone who has to actively sell the games. But I'm so bad with names, and I feel like I've been quoting so much more recently. But the Darkest Dungeon director, Chris Barossa, literally says, quote, the gold rush is over. I come from the Northwest Territories. The town I'm from was built on gold, and then they found diamonds further north. Maybe another paradigm shift is waiting for us, but I definitely think the scale of the deals I'm hearing about is significantly diminished from the big swinging days. Certainly, we got our epic deal at the right time. So that, dude, I feel like I need to get tased every time I touch my microphone. I feel I'm just too fidgety. But the reason why I was kind of brought this up as a transition is because obviously Xbox shifting that focus away. It could mean a plethora of things. Maybe they're just saying Xbox has its value already. The Xbox Game Pass has its value already, and they don't need to expand it even further. They're already, they're, to their credit, they are still expanding at a heavy rate, with new games coming out every month to the platform. But this can also, I think, reflect on how Xbox is changing generally, in recent times. So, Nick, how do you want to do this? Because this is our main topic of the show. We're talking about the crossroads that Xbox is finding itself at right now, and how it can maybe move forward, and if maybe, not to be clickbait, but maybe if it's too late for Xbox. But Nick, what do you think? Oh.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about Game Pass, seeing as we've already set it up that way. To start out with, that article, or like headline news, however you want to phrase that.
Yeah.
That, to what you were saying, like I agree. I think that's just kind of emblematic of where the industry is in 2024 right now. Like we're still getting layoffs, we're still getting cuts. Like money is drying up right now. So like that doesn't at all surprise me that these deals are drying up. Like I don't think that should surprise anybody.
And again, just to cover my ass, and just because I know that I don't want anything to be kind of misconstrued, I'm not necessarily saying by that quote, I'm not necessarily saying that Xbox is drying up. It's just a transition I'm using to get us into the main topic of the show. So that's just me herding the sheep in a direction. I'm not necessarily saying like, Xbox is dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, like the stuff, the drying up that the deals are happening. It's only, I would say, drying up because we've, heard of some crazy deals, stuff that are a lot of money. It's like they're not going to pay that forever. Yeah. Like, and anybody that thought that would is also, I would think, the people that, were overhiring so much, like, over the last couple of years. I think I had heard on a couple of other podcasts that I listened to, people that have like connections to other devs that got Game Pass deals.
Whoa. We got connections to devs. What are you talking about, man?
Yes, but, potentially bigger fish would have like, one of these gold
we're not
rush
the Jeff
deals.
Grubbs and Jason Schreiers out there. I get it.
Right. From what I heard from some of them was that like, a Game Pass deal paid for the development. And so like when you hear that, it's like, okay, that's probably a good chunk of change. And like, again, just reinforcing that, like that likely never would have continued beyond a certain point.
Right.
And yeah, like as you mentioned with the, deals still coming to Game Pass and, games getting added every month. We have like one Activision Blizzard game so far, and that was Diablo 4.
Diablo 4,
like, they still have a massive amount of stuff that probably for like a year or two
they could release,
just like pop in like an Activision Blizzard game every month.
You can get one, one Call of Duty a month, dude, and you're set for a good few months.
Exactly.
No, and I do think that speaking about Game Pass, I still do think it's a very good value, despite not have even if the developers aren't getting that money up front, right? And again, this is kind of not, I'm not just saying this like out of my ass. I've been writing about video games for the last 3 years, and so even by just like osmosis, we're picking up information about this stuff. But like the thing that that's great about Game Pass is that it gets eyes on your game. And that's huge. Think about the amount of games that have, I mean, like Pal World. I strongly believe Pal World would not be the phenomenon it is if, or like it wouldn't be as big if people on Game Pass didn't have just immediate access to it and could be like, oh, what's this Pal World, and then hop on and play it. A game that I know that we covered, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That game, it was same thing. I wanted to play it, and I asked Nick. I was like, "Hey, you have Game Pass? You want to download the game and play it?" And just like that, and we just actually let me look it up because maybe I'll be able to find it. But they actually sent out a recent kind of update about the game's selling because hold on. Oh yeah, there it is. So it says Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1.1 million units sold, and 4.5 million players on Game Pass. So that totals 5.6 million players. But you have to that's a massive amount of players that Game Pass is bringing in. I saw a similar thing, or I heard similar sentiments from I forget the name of the developers now, but the developers of Sea of Stars. They released their game day and date, not just on Xbox Game Pass, but also on PlayStation Plus Extra. And they also said like that kind of opened the doors for a lot of players who maybe were a little bit iffy on it, just kind of getting into the game and giving it a go. So I still think that Game Pass is a huge value, and when we're talking about even if we're using that clickbait title of "Is it too late for Xbox?" It's not necessarily like we're not talking about Xbox just being like, all right, guys, we're closing shop. It's not to that level. It's more about Xbox moving away from the console market and kind of maybe focusing on becoming a game publisher. Now, the reason for this is that we have, just recently, Hi-Fi Rush and is it Pentiment? There's 3 games total,
Pentiment,
right?
And Grounded and Sea of Thieves.
Oh, 4. Okay.
There's 4.
So, 4 of those games have now jumped to PlayStation as well. Or, I know at least Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment, I think, are both out. I'm not sure if
Grounded is as well. I'm not sure if Sea of Thieves is out yet.
But this is a strange time to be in because, we have now, you can, Xbox published games that are Xbox exclusives that are going over to PlayStation. And this isn't like Nick, what are you, general thoughts on this? I don't want
to, again, kind of like the microtransaction debate. Like I feel like people on this spectrum on the internet
definitely
have,
go
like,
from one to the
most
one to
extremes. The other. For me personally, I am a firm believer and follower of the go where the good games are kind of discourse.
Right.
So this really couldn't matter less to me that Xbox exclusives are going to PlayStation. If it means more people can play it, and if it means that I can get a sequel to games that I love, like Hi-Fi Rush, do it. I don't care. For me personally, it is not a consideration. I can see the point where somebody, might have, less, income to spend on games, and they only go with one console. And I can see that this being like, an issue in that regard.
Yeah.
But in general, for me personally, more people playing a game is not an issue. So that's kind of my stance on it. Like, I really couldn't care less if these are exclusive. I would love to see Sony exclusives come to Xbox. I doubt that's going to happen.
Right.
And Nintendo's never going to publish on anything other than Nintendo unless, something extremely radical happens at that company.
Like Xbox buys Nintendo.
Yeah, but even that probably wouldn't happen. I feel like not even all the money Microsoft has would be enough to sway that.
So this is, I think for 90% of the time, Nick and I are on similar pages about this kind of stuff. So I also think that, maybe in my younger years, like when I was in high school, I think I probably I was a PlayStation junkie. I was kind of in that headspace of that console generation. But honestly, over time, and I think that as we cover so many games that we kind of we go through so many games. Consoles kind of blur the line. I mean, I don't even remember some of the consoles that I'm playing some of these games on. It's just kind of like I'm playing the games, and that it's that experience that I really want to kind of remember, right? It's not like, oh, was I pressing X or triangle. Like that's kind of a little bit irrelevant to the point.
Real quick, does that trip you up?
No,
Different face buttons for different things. I'm the same way. It does not trip me up,
I've
and I
gotten
hear
used
some
to it.
people that are like, I get so confused whether like what A is
See,
when I usually use X, and it's like I've never had that issue.
it
These
becomes
games
more
are
of like
designed the same way.
yeah, I
Like,
mean, it becomes more of like so. I have obviously the PS5 controller, the Xbox, and then where it gets really weird is the Steam Deck has YBAX, but like like I mean, I'll show for the video people. This isn't what it is on Xbox, is it? Oh, it is.
yeah.
Oh, damn. Well, all right. It's just Xbox ones. Well, yeah.
Nintendo Switch has the same ones, but
Oh,
offset.
Switch. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that
That's
one
what I was on.
I will say that one does trip me up occasionally,
Sure, sure,
but
sure.
not usually.
But no, I think I've when I pick up something, I kind of like my brain just kind of like, okay, this is what I'm playing, and I just kind of go into it. So yeah, even if I switch to, I haven't played the Switch in a while, so maybe the Switch will kind of screw me over. But yeah, so far, yeah, I'm pretty good with it.
That was just a thing I wanted to throw in there because like I've heard people do that, and it's always something when I hear it, I'm just like, how though? Like
yeah,
like if you're playing like I don't know, it's something that's like on every platform. Like this will be an extreme example, but it's
Call of
like
Duty.
somebody getting like R2 and right trigger confused for shooting in a Call of Duty
Sure,
game.
sure.
It's just like it's the same button on both controllers. Like, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. And I remember it wasn't always the case because back in the PS3 360, RT was the shoot button on like for first person shooters, but it was R1 on
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation, which is always really
Mm-hmm.
weird. But
I'm
I
glad they changed that.
I did too. I'm glad that was and they also changed the shape of the button to be more of a trigger than like the PS3 was like not, it didn't curve out, it curved in, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress. So to kind of go back to the point though, it doesn't matter what console now. And from the point of view of Xbox, I think there was this really great, again, the one free plug goes out to for this episode goes out to Kind of Funny, because on the Kind of Funny XCast, they had an episode right around after Redfall came out, and they had this really great interview where Phil Spencer was just kind of had this very open conversation about games, and he said a lot of things that I thought were just kind of really powerful, like just kind of really open things that you don't really expect to hear from like a typical head of a big console or a big platform like that. But he said like, again, this is Redfall came out but before Starfield, and I remember he had said like, oh, it doesn't matter if Starfield comes out and it's an 11 out of 10 game, it's not gonna, people aren't just gonna switch over they're not gonna sell their PS5s and buy Xbox Series X's the next day. That's just now how the market works. And in topical news, just recently, as of let's see here, March 29th, on the 481st episode of the official PlayStation podcast, Jim Ryan, for, by the way, happy retirement to Jim coming up, but Jim was on the podcast, and he actually said that the PS5 is well on track to becoming the most successful console of their like in PlayStation history, I believe is essentially what he said, which is crazy numbers, considering how incredibly successful the PlayStations have been, the PS2, PS4 being kind of the big examples. So it makes sense that they would, when they're producing games, they're putting millions and millions and millions of dollars behind some of these projects, or even tens of millions in acquiring teams that are making these millions-dollar projects. It makes sense that you'd want as many people to play it as possible, especially when you're getting on a platform that's like the PlayStation 5, that's so fast, so high selling, or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
What I also find interesting, and maybe kind of has to do with part of this, and I'm curious about kind of what you think about this as well, because it's not new part of the conversation that developers have been saying Xbox, mainly the Xbox Series S is a little bit more of a troublesome console to do port for. Um,
Hmm.
I think Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of a big example of this, where that game's, I believe they actually said like the Xbox Series S version is specifically the thing that is holding the delaying the game. So, that's why, it's one of the, I think there's many reasons, but there's quite a few games that release, on PlayStation first, on PlayStation consoles and PC, and then there's an Xbox port that comes a little bit later. Even today, and I don't even know if this is if this is an example. I'm just using it because it's relevant. I had mentioned on episode 1 a game called Deceit 2, and it came out on PC. It's out today, or maybe yesterday. It's out yesterday on PS5, and it's coming very soon to Xbox, but I don't see it out yet. But again, I don't know if that's necessarily an example of that, but we've seen multiple examples of this. Do you think this is a factor in this kind of shift that Xbox is doing? Because again, to kind of really paraphrase everything I'm saying, would it make sense if you're a developer to port your game, put more work into it, porting a game onto a platform that won't have as many sales? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Are you specifically asking
Like, do you think
through
that's
Series
actually?
S or Xbox in general?
Well, I mean, Xbox. Well, I'm saying Xbox in general because I think Xbox in general this generation, isn't on par with the PlayStation 5, right? Like, and I think that the Xbox Series S has become a limitation for the Xbox generation as a whole. This new current
Gotcha.
generation as a whole. Or do you think that's not as much of a factor in terms of like, obviously we were talking about the Game Pass benefit.
Hmm. So I'll tackle it from the Series S first because that I think is the more interesting, point about this, and that's going into this generation, hearing that they were going to be doing like a lower spec system that was going to be more cost affordable, I think that that was a smart idea. Like I think that, usually when these systems come out, they're like, comparably priced. Xbox, PlayStation, Switch is usually like a little bit cheaper, but not by much
Right.
these days. Um, and I always thought that that was like a smart idea. It was like, yeah, you get the people that, they want to upgrade, but they don't have the cash to just fork over 500 or whatever for a new console.
Yeah.
You get that crowd in there. Sure, they have to make some concessions. You can't play at 4K, 60 FPS, and you can't get a disc drive. But, if there's a game that's exclusive to the newer gens and you want to play it at a cheaper price, like I always thought that that was a smart idea. I do think, however, no, now a couple years removed from the launch of these systems, I do think that this is probably something that in like a decade, when we have a new Xbox and new PlayStation, and we're getting, historical recollections from either Phil Spencer or other people, I would be curious to see if they would consider that a misstep. Because that is kind of the sentiment that I've heard, and I do think it is a contributing factor to why games don't release like at the same time on Xbox. Now, some games might release on PlayStation PC because they have like
Exclusivity.
those
And
random
PlayStation
small
will
exclusive
definitely
rights
is
or
willing to.
whatever.
Yeah, PlayStation's willing to buy a few months of time if they can to get exclusive content.
Exactly. So it's like that isn't that much of a surprise, but I do think that the lower spec, as you mentioned before, like that does put a lot more work on the developers. And if the PS3 taught anybody anything, making more work for the developers usually isn't a great idea
Yeah.
when you want to have, as much, potential for
Yeah.
your hardware platform. So that kind of angle, I think, is what interested me more. Like I would be curious, and Xbox is open about their failures. I mean, they put out a 6-part documentary about the history of Xbox for their 25th anniversary, and they did not like shy away from their screw ups. So
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see where the Series S lands
Yeah.
going forward. But um,
And
kind of
there
lost the
is.
lead on your original question, though.
Oh, it was just talking. I mean, it was just kind of talking about if that's impacting or if that's just kind of like if that's not as big of an impact, um, on this kind of current market place where Xbox stands. Having
Hmm.
this console that's kind of maybe a little bit underpowered, because I really do think that, um, and before we get, I mean, we're already deep into this topic, but I have to say this, we're not just hating on Xbox. Like, I feel like, whenever you bring up any console, right? Even if we're talking about PlayStation or Xbox, the moment you start saying anything that's a little bit critical, people are like, "You're just you're on the other side." Look, wait, actually, you know what? Here's a special video exclusive for you. I'll go into my background, and I actually have. This is from the 20. As you guys know, we started in 2021, so this was a really cool thing we got to kind of commemorate it. This is the 2021 Xbox and Bethesda Games Showcase, like, cup. It's like and it has Respawn Station on it, as you can see. And
That's awesome. I've never seen that.
yeah, yeah, and so definitely not hating on Xbox. We're on even ground here. No bad blood anywhere.
If you want an additional proof of that, I can share, an opinion on the Sony and Xbox kind of thing, which I know I've shared with you specifically in the past. And it's, scores aside, obviously Xbox, their exclusives, their first party exclusives, they don't score like Sony exclusives do. But I would argue that Xbox actually makes the better exclusives or the better games that I would want to play because they have more variety and it seems like they're a bit more experimental. Whereas I find that Sony for the last like half decade has been extremely safe in all their first party kind of games. A lot of them are third person, you know, you got a buddy with you, gabbering and, shooting with you in combat. They're usually kind of stealthy, but also have crafting and stuff. And it's something that like again, they're really high quality and they sell
Right.
really well. And like narratively, they're always really strong. But then I go and play like a Psychonauts 2 or a Hi-Fi Rush, and I'm like, man, why can't Sony just use some of this stuff too? Like
Yeah.
they could have all the best parts of it. I do
Yeah.
think Xbox, for whatever reason, they can't kind of hit those critical numbers like they do. But absolutely, I'm more often than not, I'm excited to see what Xbox is bringing to the table rather than Sony in recent years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm I can't really speak one way or another about it. I think I've actually, and this is something I've been thinking about more recently, because I think, in the last 3 years since we've started doing Respawn Station, I actually have not played that many like big AAA games, because I'm usually covering indie games. So yeah, I find I might not even be able to speak to like which one I think is doing what better, but no, I can certainly see that point of view, and for me, I don't necessarily think that that Xbox has the better exclusives. I think they've for me, I think Xbox has definitely fumbled a lot of launches, and in terms of like Halo Infinite and everything that happened with that game, and um,
Which is also fair and appropriate to have that mindset.
but for me, what I more so appreciate what the direction that Phil Spencer has really led this company in this last generation. I think almost everything that they've done this generation in terms of actual kind of big, broad decisions has been correct, or like something that I think is really smart. It's all like whatever you might say about the Xbox Series S and its limitations and its being underpowered, and if it's a bad idea or not. I think ultimately it speaks to their goal of kind of getting everyone to be a gamer. Like, whatever, it's accessible. You can get into the platform. It's a great entryway system to get into just the latest generation of games. And it's certainly. I remember like before I got my Xbox Series X, the first thing I picked up on the first day, like when the pre-orders went up, I actually picked up an Xbox Series S initially myself. And also, I think that some of the stuff about how, like, the streaming and how that's kind of going forward, that's their focus on streaming is really interesting, and or sorry, not streaming. I should say cloud gaming is more accurate. Um, and so all that stuff, I really do kind of agree with. It's just that I don't think that any of that, and I think this is something that they've realized too, is really selling these consoles. And I don't think if we're going off of those documents that they uploaded and stuff, I don't think a white Xbox, and actually I think someone found like production units in the wild out there. But I don't think a white Series X that has no disk drive is going to change the market either. I don't think it's going to sweep anything in one way or like in the opposite direction. So
Yeah,
they're too
I
far
saw
gone that
some of
route.
those like leaked photos for the white Series X, and based on what the conversation's been around them, like I my read on the entire situation is like rather than getting, out of hardware, like many people are saying, like, oh, is Xbox leaving hardware? It's like I don't think that's necessarily the case. I feel like they're just kind of gonna be putting out like options for people.
Sure.
Weirdly enough, like it sounds weird to say it like that, but it's like I feel like, you know, they also know that a white Series X without a disk drive is not going to reverse their fortunes.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be like another thing that they're like, yeah, we have a new Xbox out. Like,
Yeah.
this one doesn't have a disk drive. If that's your speed, go ahead and grab it. Like, if you want the functionality of a Series S, but with the power of a
The
Series
power and
X, like
memory.
I
Yeah.
could see that being, enticing to someone.
Yeah.
Uh,
But at the same time,
Not
it's
to
not
me,
like,
but
so I worked at GameStop when the pros for the last generation were coming out, and I remember people would come in and be like, oh yeah, I'm trading in my PS4, and I'm like, my launch PS4, I'm getting a PS4 Pro because that was a substantial update or upgrade. This is not an upgrade, it's a reskin, if anything, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of what it is. But also, you know this seems to be a weird kind of misalignment in the stars, because PlayStation's out here, kind of, I think, behind closed doors, showing off the PS5 Pro, and Xbox is, I don't think has really kind of, I don't think there's anything kind of going on around that, and I think the PS5 Pro is supposed to launch later this year, or actually maybe like next year. But either way, we haven't gotten any of that kind of thing from Xbox. And at this rate, I mean, why are we? First of all, at this rate, for Xbox, I don't think it's necessary to have a different design that's not like a limited edition. Why are we? This is a whole nother topic I can definitely do, but like, we need more limited edition consoles that aren't like giveaways on Twitter, for two people.
Mhm.
But for PlayStation, we're not even. I really don't think we're really into this generation. I think this generation is, we've gotten some stuff, but like very much so, everyone's still kind of getting their kind of holds into the industry, and it's only been like what, last year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. Recently, since they launched in 2020, that people have been getting them kind of readily. Obviously there's that shortage for the first 2 years that they launched, so it's really kind of the industry's kind of catching up. I don't know if we necessarily need a Pro right now. I don't know what game other than maybe GTA 5 is out here demanding them so heavily that we're like, yeah, we need a PS5 Pro to shake things up.
Yeah, I feel like, it's definitely well, I mean, this is going to sound extremely obvious saying it, but it's definitely like a suit mandated kind of decision.
Somewhere high
Like
up, yeah.
if you just look at the timelines, I mean, PS4, let's just use PlayStation as the example.
Yeah.
PS4 releases in 2013,
Yeah.
and PS5 releases in 2020. So let's say that generation was 7 years.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it like 2017 or 18 that the Pro came out for PS4?
16.
16.
Yeah.
So that's 3 years. So like, we're at that 3 year
Yeah.
mark
November
right
10th,
now.
2016. Yep.
Exactly. So it's like, yes, like if we're using the PS4 generation as our touchstone, around now we should be hearing about and
Sure.
getting a PS5 Pro. But like, Yeah, I think the difference maker is that probably if we looked at it again, I don't have actual information in front of me, but probably by this point right now, I would feel that the PS4 probably had more of a base of software than the PS5 has.
Yeah,
Because that's
definitely.
something that I hear a lot of people talking about, where it's like, you have Demon Souls and Ratchet and Clank. Outside of those, it's like you don't really have like a whole lot of, that baseline PS5 exclusive kind of stuff. I
Yeah,
think Returnal is also an exclusive,
exclusive.
excuse me, but like it's definitely I think most people realize that it's not actually at the same level, and that's why I think a lot of people are like, "Why are we talking about a pro right now? You can't even get, you know,
Right.
like a baseline of software that makes it feel like we're halfway through a generation." I think also probably releasing so many games releasing cross-platform on
Yeah.
the last gen still, I think that also plays into it because it's like, well, if we're still releasing these games on last gen hardware, it's like, why do I need a pro if I don't even technically need the new one?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that PC has definitely played an impact in this whole thing as well. Just kind of how many games, I really did not honestly think that PlayStation would make a move on PC, but here we are, with all their kind of big tentpole titles coming to PC.
Where's
So,
Bloodborne 3?
uh, one day, Nick. Once
My,
they
my buddy, real quick. Sorry,
once they remaster The Last of Us Part 2 again, we'll get a Bloodborne remaster or Bloodborne 2.
my buddy one day a couple weeks ago, he was telling me that he saw a meme online. I think it was when Ghost of Tsushima got announced for PC, and he was like, basically, this one person posted, "This is the only PS4 exclusive that's not on PC," and it was Bloodborne. It's just like
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and the last point about Xbox before we kind of move into the last segment of the show is that they've also focused they've hinted at some of the stuff about do you remember the code word? It's like a fire stick, not scarlet.
Oh yes.
It was essentially like Amazon Fire TV or Roku shaped device that you plug into your TV HDMI, and it lets you cloud stream Xbox games. That was also something that I think they were experimenting with, or trialing, or kind of prototyping is the word. And then Xbox ended up signing a deal with Samsung that kind of put Xbox cloud streaming on, or the xCloud on Samsung smart TVs built in. So I think that kind of took a backseat a little bit comparatively, but
I did a quick Google search. It was Keystone
Keystone,
was the
sure.
the code word.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so to wrap up this whole conversation, which has definitely been all over the place in terms of how many things we've covered from how many different angles. We talked about it from PlayStation, Xbox, consoles, games, exclusives. But to wrap it all up, I think Xbox, and kind of closing thoughts on this kind of topic. I'll let you also kind of share yours, Nick. But essentially, I think Xbox, moving forward. Well, I don't think they'll ever truly get out of Xbox consoles completely, and maybe there is a future that in two console generations they're like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. Maybe that'll happen. It would just be weird if they stepped out of the console kind of race entirely. But I do think that it's interesting and it's smart for them to focus on publishing games and getting the games that they are spending a lot of money on, and getting them to make more money, hopefully, to kind of keep to what Nick's point is, and I hope I'm not stealing Nick's point if he tries to make it, but Xbox has been a voice for weird titles. Pentiment being kind of an example of just a really left wing, not politically, out of left field idea. That and same thing with Hi-Fi Rush. These games that you don't necessarily expect, because Pentiment is from Oblivion, right?
Obsidian.
Obsidian, not Oblivion. Jesus, Obsidian. Yes. And similarly, Hi-Fi Rush from Tango. So it's great to see the kind of the way they're allowing their teams to go with these weird ideas. And maybe there was a time where PlayStation was like that too, but yeah, they've definitely, they have this if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality with some of these games. And so I hope that while PlayStation's doing their thing with their big AAA games, I also really hope that Xbox continues doing their thing. It's just that it just sucks because it seems that every time that they're doing something right or they're doing things that are kind of on the right path, there's always something that fucks them up and kind of, they stumble in some way, shape, or form. But I really do appreciate the commitment Xbox has had this generation to kind of getting the games out to as many people as possible, making it easy to play games, and kind of making this whole thing as frictionless as we can. While PlayStation is out here fucking raising the console prices, or the game prices, I should say, and everyone fucking follows suit after that.
Mm. Yeah, I think we're definitely, like us as consumers, are witnessing Xbox having an identity crisis right now
Yeah,
when it comes to, what they want to go for, like what they want to, do going forward. I think the Activision Blizzard uh, buyout was probably, I mean, obviously it was a massive deal, and people were covering all the legal side of that for
a
over a
long time.
year
Yeah,
until that closed. But I truly think that was probably the moment, or like at least them going through that process and describing like all these 10-year deals that they have to make, where they probably started doing some reevaluation and were like, why do we just have all these things exclusive? Like even when Bethesda was bought out, that still kind of felt like those old Microsoft buyouts where they
right.
were just like trying to beef up their exclusive lineup. Activision Blizzard felt different, I think, for most people. When like if you were to ask most people, I feel like they would say that
Yeah,
that definitely felt like a different kind of move.
yeah.
So I think that's kind of where all of this started. Like what you said though, I think I don't think they're ever going to get out of it. I mean, if you look in
And I hope they
historically
don't, because it
speaking,
would be terrible to be in a monopoly. Because I don't think, while Nintendo sells consoles, PlayStation is really like the home console powerhouse in terms of like just purely selling units. And yeah, it would be a terrible monopoly to be in.
yeah, I think the basically them trying to what I was going to say was in historically speaking, I bet if you ask anybody from the 90s when, the height of Sega versus Nintendo, if
Sure.
Sega would ever exit the console space,
Yeah.
I doubt many people
Oh,
would
damn.
say that. So like I bet,
Wow. We're looking back
it's
10 years from now, on episode 22 of this podcast and say, wow, can't believe we were
yeah,
wrong about that.
Xbox left and they literally took all the Xboxes away and threw them away just like ET.
Yeah. And,
Um,
and we'll live in a reality where PlayStation's still actually falls to second place, and Soldier Boy consoles take up number one.
God, that thing. Um, but yeah, I think, obviously we're at, as the title suggests, we're at a crossroads. We're seeing them pulling a couple threads, I feel like, and
Yeah, and
you
seeing what
know,
sticks.
we'll see what happens, what the next year even holds for good old Xbox.
Yeah, definitely. And but with that said, that brings us to the end of the main topic of the show. Man, we're an hour and 20 into this, but you know what, people, and I have to say this before we get to the final kind of segment. Thank you for the general support. This is actually, we've gotten quite a few listeners and quite a few new listeners specifically. Not the video stuff, just on Spotify. Spotify alone, I haven't even looked at the metrics on Apple Podcasts and stuff. But thank you to anyone who's kind of listening. Whether you're on your drive to work or home, or just having us in the background while you work, whatever it is. Thanks for joining us. And if you haven't yet done so already, please check out respawnstation.com. helps out a lot and lets us kind of get more developers and important people that know more about this stuff than we do on the show to talk about it. And yeah. So with that said, it's time for my favorite segment, the inbox. There's a few items to cover today, starting off with a cozy froggy farming sim called Kameru, a frog refuge. The write-up is on respawnstation.com as well. You can check it out. But essentially, this is a game where you are photographing, breeding, and feeding over 500 different frogs. And essentially, it's like a frog sanctuary simulator. It has this really, really nice like watercolor art style that I really like. And it's coming to Nintendo Switch and PC later this year, mid 2024. I think is the window. So definitely look out for that one. Again, this is an email we got, and I just really thought it looked cool, and so I wanted to give it a little shout out. Again, you can find out more about it on the website. Next game on the list, or next email, I should say. Next email on the list, Predator Hunting Grounds is coming to the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series XS. This is from Ilphonics, who their upcoming game is the Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the game. Some of you guys might know. But Predator Hunting Grounds is a 1 versus 4 asymmetrical multiplayer experience where obviously one person plays as the Predator and the other 4 play as kind of, I think, just human soldiers. So this kind of latest press release about it, the game is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series XS alongside major content updates. Is coming up, and there's also going to be major content updates in 2024 and 2025, with Ilphonic as the new publisher in collaboration with 20th Century Games, which is pretty cool. Have you played Predator Hunting Grounds, Nick?
I have not. I think it was a PS Plus game, so I think I have it, but
Okay. Sure.
I have not played it myself. I watched a couple streams of it around when it came out, when people actually
Sure.
like
Yeah, I did too, I
were
think.
playing it a lot. Um, I just wanted to look at something here because okay, yeah, I don't think that's the case right now. I was gonna say I'm not sure if I've mentioned it on our podcast yet, but as you are aware, Sri, I am a big collector of physical media. And I was just going to put out a little, info out there for those people that are like me and who like buying their games physically. If it sounds interesting to you from Ilphonic, perhaps think about getting a copy. Just because I know they also did the Friday the 13th game.
Yeah.
And that game has, I believe, been delisted at this point. And if it seems like Ilphonic is, kind of making a name for themselves with these like licensed properties. So they have Predator. I believe they also did a
Ghostbusters.
I'm not 100% positive. Yeah, Ghostbusters, was that them?
Yep.
So yeah, I would say with these, licensed IP games, if you think it sounds interesting, if you can find a, affordably priced, used copy, consider getting it if you think you're going to want to play that in the future, because you never know with how these deals, especially with like the movie tie and stuff, like what those kind of things are like. You can have like 2 years on the shelf and then you're done. So.
Yeah, definitely. And so to briefly, so I'll touch on this before we keep going. So what's coming to the game in 2024, 2025? On April 2024, this month, they have patch 2.49, which will cover the currently released PS4 and PC version of the game. And the focus is on player movement, fire team weapon rework and balance, etc., etc. You can find the full patch notes when it comes out, I'm guessing. So, but in late 2024, the Xbox Series XS and PC version of the game will come out. And also, the game is the release is focused on the next generation, running on Unreal 4.27, with a standard edition and a digital deluxe edition offered. In winter of 2024, there will be new Predators, and then in spring of 2025, there will be even more new Predators to play as. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. I am actually a big fan of Ilphonics, and so they are. I have to imagine a really, really busy set of people, like a busy team, because obviously they have obviously have Predator Hunting Grounds that we just talked about. But the next inbox that we have to talk about is Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, a 4 versus 1 haunt or hunt action-packed video game for the asymmetrical multiplayer experts at Ilphonic, as it says. So they have just revealed their year 2 DLC. So here's what we're looking at here. Let me actually open this so I can look at it easier. Crap. Okay, there we go. Nick's gone. There you go. No, it's all right. I'm back. All right. So in spring, so year 2, in spring, the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire premiere celebration doesn't stop at the theater. This DLC will feature elements from the new movie, including the latest villain to hit the scene, Garaka, apparently is what his name. So there'll be Twitch drops, gear shells, cosmetics, etc. In the summer, there will be, this year marks the 40th anniversary of the Ghostbusters legacy, and joining the party are a lineup of Slimers. Celebrate Slimer in multiple forms, as he will be represented across his key roles. So you'll have Frozen Empire Slimer, RGB Slimer, Classic Slimer, and there'll also be Twitch drops. In fall, I'm just going to go through it real fast. So there's going to be Bounty for the Ages, gear shells, cosmetics, and Twitch drops. In winter, there'll be Ghost. Let's see. It's just going to be more content. There'll be a special Ghost reveal, gear shells, and cosmetics, and of course Twitch drops. So if you have not yet played, God damn it, it's gone again. All right, Nick is back. I actually have played Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed. They were nice enough to send us over a few codes back when the game came out, and it's actually really fun. Even if I'm not even a big Ghostbusters fan, I have enjoyed the last the last movie, and I've heard good things about the latest. I just named the names. I watched Ghostbusters Afterlife and had a really good time with it, and I've heard good things about Frozen Empire. So I'm looking forward to going back and playing Ghostbusters Unleashed, Spirits Unleashed some more, because it is actually really fun, and I believe it is on Game Pass. I could be wrong. Maybe that's not true. But either way, I'd recommend checking it out.
I can fact check real quick.
Perfect. It's a really fun one, and I'm sure if you follow us on Chumbag HQ on Twitch, there's a chance that we'll probably play that game again.
If it is on Game Pass, it's not on Game Pass PC.
Okay. It could be wrong. I don't know. It feels like a title that could be on Game Pass, but if it's not, I apologize. There's another one. Next game up is a unique game that actually I had.
Auto Online's genres are action and adventure.
Do you hear that?
I did a little bit. What was that?
My Alexa just fucking started speaking and said something about genre. I don't know what it said. This game I actually did send out to Nick, but it's called Saviorless. It is a hand-drawn art style for is it 2D platformer? I don't know. I guess it's
I think
a 2D
that's what I saw.
I always get weird, like, in terms of, like, if they don't specifically say 2D platformer, I sometimes... Oh, no, yeah, okay. Dark fantasy, 2D platformer. Okay, it is 2D. But yeah, it's a platformer. It has really cool hand-drawn art style that yeah, it just, like, looks really kind of sharp and stunning. Unfortunately, I'm terrible at platformers, and it's just, like, of all the games that I have going on right now, this was not the one I knew I'd be good at and enjoy as much, but if you're a fan of platformers, perhaps like Pepper Grinder, then maybe you'll like this game from Empty Head Games. It just released on April 2nd for the PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and PC. Is there anything else to really highlight here? Here's actually, this is probably the coolest thing. I remember I highlighted this so I could say it. So this game, Savorless, is actually the first ever independent video game from Cuba to collaborate with an international publisher, which I thought was really, really, really fucking cool. The studio itself, the developing studio, is based in Havana, Cuba. There you go, Cuba. I actually said it incorrectly or correctly incorrect on accident. So I'll pretend I meant to say that the whole time. So check that out. And then the last, what do we have here? The last thing on the docket is, oh right, this is kind of a cool one. We got a press release for an upcoming kind of chill, cozy farm game. Farm sim. I'm sure you've seen them. Stardew Valley being a very famous example, but it's one of those kind of games that we got a press release for, called Echoes of the Plum Grove. It's brought to you by Unwound Games and publisher Freedom Games. But the thing that I found really interesting about this was, I was looking through, and I being a big fan of cozy farm sims, I was like, oh, this kind of looks fun. Has like a unique kind of 2D art style with, while being kind of in a 3-dimensional space. They kind of look like, you're moving around like 2D pieces in a 3D world. But the fun fact here is that we backed this game on Kickstarter probably like last year or something. So if you play the game, I'm not sure if they put their Kickstarter backers on their credits or not, but there's a chance that you will see Respawn Station in the credits. The game, again, is called Echoes of the Plum Grove, and it is out on PC via Steam on April 29th. So at the end of the month. Maybe I'll shout it out again at the end of the month when we get to, I don't know, whatever episode that will be.
Right on.
But with that said, I think that's all that I had to cover. I think we've made it through, Nick.
Episode 4 in the bag.
That's it. And episode 4 has got to be the best one, because 4 is, of course, the best number to ever exist. But that's just my favorite number, for anyone who couldn't pick up on that subtle reference that I just made. But with that said, hopefully you guys actually, no, Nick, you did the intro. You got to do the outro. I will end my segment with this little teaser. Episode 3, I teased that I'd talk about Slay the Princess. So episode 4, I'm going to talk about a certain sim next week that is currently, I think, embargoed. But I just got a code for it earlier today. It's let's see, what other hints can I give? It's a PC game that is coming to consoles soon. So find out what that is next episode. But with that said, Nick, feel free to wrap it up, share your final thoughts, and bring it home.
Yeah, sure. This was a good conversation here. I know I mentioned to you before recording that maybe we shouldn't cover the Dragon's Dogma stuff, but I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think we were able to tackle a couple different angles of that conversation.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was a nice conversation back and forth throughout the entire show.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks to everybody who has been listening and who has been leaving ratings. Don't forget to do that, and reviews and all that. That does obviously help us out. And with that said, I'm going to try my best.
Go for it,
I don't know exactly what you say, but it's have a good evening and have a damn good time.
Close enough.